My name is Phil, and I'm with the Stories Project, and I'm here today with Miss Judy Murphy, and we're going to have a lovely conversation. So, first of all, thank you for doing this. I'm excited for you and for your family.
Thank you.
So, I like to start where it all began.
Well, I was born in Waukesha, Wisconsin, in 1942. My parents were Pete and Emma Pellegrini. So part of my heritage is Italian,
Okay.
and the other half is Polish.
I like both kind of foods.
I do too, but especially Italian.
Yeah.
My parents were married during the Depression,
Okay.
and so there were many traits that followed them through their lives about saving and economizing, and I always had a very, very happy childhood. Went to school, grade school, and high school in Waukesha.
You did?
Went
Okay.
to St. Joe's. And
What about siblings? You have any siblings?
had two brothers.
Okay.
One brother, they were both older than I. I was the youngest,
Okay.
the baby in the family.
Mm-hmm.
My brother Peter was unfortunately killed in a hunting accident when he was 14.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I was too. I was only 5 when that happened.
Wow.
And my brother Jim passed away several years ago while living with me. Jim was developmentally disabled, and so he had always lived with my parents, and then when they were elderly and became more unable to care for themselves, they lived with me as well. So.
Gotcha. Wow. That's a lot to handle at times, I'm assuming. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about like your school years. And so any particular like best friends that you want
Sure.
to talk about? Or
Those were the days when you could play outside until the streetlights came on, and you felt safe wherever you went, really. We walked all over or rode our bikes. I had 2 very good friends who lived in the neighborhood. We were friends all through grade school that I recall, Becky and Pauline Cotter, their names were. And when Pauline was about 4 years older than I was, and when she started going to high school, our friendship kind of separated a little bit, but I stayed friends with Becky for several more years after that. Those are the 2 main friends during my childhood. And then in high school, of course, I had made very good friends. I have one friend, Pat, who is still a friend.
Very
and
nice.
We've been out of high school since 60. So lifelong friend. She lived in Waukesha her whole life. I traveled around when I was married, especially, and but we picked up wherever we left off
That's
whenever
awesome.
we saw each other again.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of, did you do any kind of like activities in school, like, I don't know, basketball or something like that? Anything to mention like that?
You know, there were no organized sports for girls then.
You know, like music or
I was
debate
in the choir.
club, or you were
In the choir.
Okay.
Yep. And Spanish. I don't think we had a Spanish club, but I loved Spanish. I only took 2 years of it because that's all that was offered at that time. But I always loved the choir, and I still sing today.
Yeah.
So that was a very gift. It was a gift that I enjoyed very much.
Awesome.
We did a lot of activities outdoors, though. We skated on the river during the winter. We went sledding. We went, when I was in high school, we went to Friday night dances every week. And we met a lot of kids from the public high school at those dances because they were open to everyone in the city.
Oh, that's
if
cool.
you were in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of friends. Made a lot of good friends in high school.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit juicier. What about like boyfriends? Your first boyfriend or something like that?
Oh yeah, you bet. I had a boyfriend in grade school.
Oh, wow.
Well, in Catholic school at that time, we weren't allowed to be on the playground together.
Wow.
And but we were neighbors as well, and so it was really more of a little crush, I'd say. But then when I got to high school, it was like the doors opened and you were able to talk to boys. You were able to walk with them in the hallways and sit with them in classrooms. It was awesome. So yeah, I had several boyfriends. One that I really, really had a bad crush on. His name was Dave Larson, and he's actually passed away. But yeah, I dated him maybe 2 years in high school.
What about the first kiss?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I do, and I remember his name too.
You want to share, or you want
David Pucci.
Pucci. Mr. Pucci.
Yeah, that's right. My friend the next day asked me, "Oh, did he walk you home?" Yes, he did. Did he kiss you? Yes, he did. Thrilling.
Yeah. The good old days.
Yep.
The good old days. Okay. Anything else that you can think of about school that just, comes to mind, or that you might want to share with the family here?
Well, I probably was a little rebellious, I think. My dad was, I was an only daughter, and he was very, very strict. Did not want me going in cars with boys, and of course I disobeyed that and went out with boys in cars. But we didn't go alone. We were, maybe 3 or 4 girls with 2 or 3 guys and that sort of thing. But there were sometimes, we had counties back then that had 18-year-old drinking beer. So we'd get in the car and go to another county and, just have fun one night.
Yeah.
However, they never asked us for identification, and it was very loose, very loose, but dangerous. We had fellow classmates who were in bad accidents on the way back from excursions like that. So you
were a little rebellious, but you weren't the party animal or anything like that. You were still a pretty good girl.
We never. I never knew anyone who had any kind of drugs at all. Beer was the biggest illegal substance we used, because it was only illegal because we were too
underage,
young.
Yeah. I have a few of those stories too, but we won't go there. Okay. What about college? Did you go to college?
I did, but as an adult. After high school, I had always wanted to be a nurse. My mother was a practical nurse, and she inspired me. But the first day in chemistry class in high school, the teacher asked what kind of grades I had in math, and apparently they weren't up to her standards, so she advised me to drop out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And take another class. So that's when I took Spanish. I loved it. But it prohibited me from getting into a nursing program in college. So I went to a licensed practical nursing program, Sacred Heart School in Milwaukee. And that was a 14-month program. You come out of there as a graduate practical nurse, and then you take licensing boards for a licensed practical nurse. I only worked a short time because I was married very quickly after that. Within the next couple of years, I was married and never worked while I was married.
Gotcha. So high school, and then you went to that Sacred, and then you worked for about a year or so, and then I'm assuming you met your husband.
I did.
Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Okay, sure.
So how did you guys meet?
Well, I was working as a long-distance operator.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. We actually sat at
you did have the switchboard thing,
switchboard
huh? Wow.
with the cords, and
Very cool.
And my supervisor was his aunt.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He lived with her because he was commuting. He's originally from the up north in Chippewa Falls.
Okay.
So he was commuting to Marquette University College and stayed with her. And she said, "Oh, I've got a nephew that I think you'd really hit it off." I said, "Really? Okay, well, why don't we try?" So sight unseen, I went out with him, and we were very attracted to each other right away. So
So was it a fast-moving relationship, or okay?
Very much so.
Yeah. So was he still in? I mean, how long did he have to go left of school? when you guys first met?
I think he had about a year left.
Okay.
Yeah. We met, I think, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was like early spring.
Okay.
And then I graduated from my nursing school in August. He gave me a ring, an engagement ring in August, and we were married in the next January.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty fast. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's good. I mean, my parents kind of similar story. They met at work and was relatively quick as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of neat. So, all right, you guys got married.
He was he was a senior then at Marquette.
Okay.
In ROTC. So we had our first child that very year, and then that summer he went to he graduated. I think as I recall, he graduated in January in the mid semesters.
Okay.
And then he went to basic camp, and we had 2 children, one right after the other. Well, they're only a year and 2 days apart. So he was in the Army then, active duty, and after Mark was born, the second child, he was stationed in Indian Head, Maryland, learning a specialty. And I was staying with my parents.
Okay.
And then I think Mark was born in November. Joe was born in November. And I think in February or so, then we all moved to Indian Head, Maryland. We were living in a complex that was near the base, but not on the base.
Okay.
He was in the explosive ordnance disposal.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So a lot of what he did, he couldn't share,
Right.
and so and I was so young, I didn't realize even what that meant. But then as soon as he finished that training, he was assigned to an Army depot, which is not really a big base. It's more of a storage for ammunition and such area in Texas. So we moved to Texas.
So from Maryland to Texas, okay.
Yep.
How long have you guys been in Texas?
Let's see, who was born there? Michael John was born there. And I think we lived there for about 2 years.
2 years?
Mm-hmm.
On base, off base?
Off base, but housing for military. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Very nice, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Texas is not a bad.
No, this was in Texarkana, so it was a very far, extreme part of Texas on the Arkansas border.
Gotcha.
Yeah, very humid and hot.
Yeah. Yeah. So anything exciting or noteworthy during that time in Texas?
Well, this was beginning of the civil rights movement in the early 60s. And we met a lot of, the military is very, very different than any place I've ever lived, actually. In my experience, I'm sure there's probably others' experiences who are more negative, but ours was very positive. I think a big part of it was that Phil was an officer.
Okay.
And so in our housing project where we lived, there were African-American families. And most of the women didn't work outside of the home. We would gather with our children in the mornings and at the playground. We were socially involved with them. But then Vietnam was looming.
Oh.
So, in fact, he did go to Vietnam. He went, I think Michael John was a year in January and he left in June.
So now, how old were the other two at that point?
Just 2 and 3.
Oof.
Yeah.
So 3 kids.
Yeah.
Under the age of 4. Ooh, boy.
Yeah.
And you're by yourself.
Yep.
Now, did you stay in Texas when he was? No. What'd you do?
I moved back to Waukesha to be close to my family. I needed help, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
So my parents were always very supportive of whatever I needed. And it was a pleasure because we'd been apart for a couple of years, and it was very nice to see them. And
for sure.
Be near them again. So he was wounded in, I think, probably October because of on one of the disposal issues that he had. It was more of a black powder explosion.
Okay.
Came up and burned his face and neck.
Mm.
But not, they took such good care of him. I don't know.
But I mean, he didn't lose limbs?
No,
Okay.
no. Gratefully, no.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
So, had some issues, but at least he wasn't...
No scars even.
Oh,
Actually.
really?
Right.
Wow.
No.
So the healing went good, I'm assuming.
Very well.
Yeah.
It went very well, yes.
So now, did he stay in the military after his accident, or?
Well, he couldn't go back to Vietnam because of the infection process that
Mhm.
burns is too dangerous. And he had a choice of going where he wanted to go. And because he was an engineer, there's a facility in Warren, Michigan called the Automotive Tank Command. We rented a home for about a year because we didn't know the city. And so we didn't know where we would want to buy a house.
Right.
And frankly, there was a lot of unrest at that time. That was the mid-'60s, between 65 and 70. The riots that were going on all over the country. We were living in Warren during that time, so we weren't physically affected, our home or anything by the riots, but very much aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
But we were civil rights advocates, and we spent some time demonstrating and hoping for change.
Mm-hmm.
So after a year, we bought a home in an integrated neighborhood in Detroit.
Oh, you did?
We did. The homes were beautiful, but there was a lot of white flight out of Detroit. Detroit at one time was a beautiful city. Mm-hmm. My relatives have lived there for years. Not in the city itself for many, many years, but in the suburbs.
Yep.
And they thought we were crazy for buying a home in the city.
I'm sure.
But we were idealistic. We were young, idealistic. We'd come from a military style life where everyone was pretty much included and accepted, and that was not the case in an integrated neighborhood.
I can imagine.
We were disappointed because our African American neighbors really did not want to socialize with us. It was a challenging time, but we were idealistic. I mean, I don't know what else I can say. We thought, I was going to teach our children that it's acceptable to be inclusive, and you should be inclusive. You should treat everyone fairly. So Tim was born in 1968, and we moved into Detroit when he was maybe 6 months old.
So that's number 4?
That's number 4,
okay.
Tim. Yeah. So 1968 to, probably close to the late 1970s, we lived there in the city.
Wow.
And, when I went through all their personal things from their school age years, the school turned absolutely the opposite composition of black to white students that we had when we moved in. When they started kindergarten, there were maybe 4 or 5 African American children in their classes. Total opposite when we left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and that was difficult because they had fewer friends. And then they started experiencing some really difficult things. We had 2 more boys when we lived in California or in Detroit. Yeah.
So by then you had
5.
You had all 5. Okay.
Yeah. Just one thing I fondly remember, they were so excited when we told them we were going to have Pat. Joe was 9 when Pat was born.
Okay.
Pat's the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And they all jumped up from the table and ran outside and said, "We're getting a baby. We're going to have a baby." But a very fond memory I have is Joe wanting to see this baby. When I was in the hospital to have Pat, they kept you there for a week.
Yeah,
at that time. Yeah. So he would call me every day and say, "Mom, when can I come and see that baby?" Of course, he couldn't come in because he was only 9.
Yeah.
But the day I was discharged, there he was on his bike outside waiting to see that baby. So that's just a fond memory I have. Yeah.
Any other kind of fond memories that you have when you were in Detroit?
No, a lot of negative ones.
A lot of negative ones. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine.
They would go to play at the park with their baseball bats and gloves and get stolen, all the bats and all the gloves. And they were never hurt, but very, very disturbing. Not much you could really do.
Yeah, right.
Unfortunately.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I was too.
Oh, okay. So then, Detroit, what happened after Detroit? Was your husband through with the military by then, or?
He was, but he was working as a civilian at the very same job.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So from there, we went to Charlottesville, Virginia.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So what was in Charlottesville, Virginia?
Well, there was a research command there that was Army.
Okay.
All civilians working, although they did have some military there, but not many. They were analyzing foreign science and technology, mostly with wheeled vehicles. We moved probably in 78, and we stayed there until 83. So only 5 years in.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anything else in Virginia that you want to mention, or that screaming at you here?
Well, I think one thing that struck me profoundly really was the difference in the religiosity there.
Okay.
I had been raised Catholic,
Okay.
never been exposed to anyone outside of that faith. And there were a lot of Baptists there. It's in the Bible Belt.
Yeah, gotcha.
And as soon as I moved into our subdivision, there were a group of ladies that asked me to come to a Bible study. And I'd never been to a Bible study. But I went because I wanted to get to know them and see what were they talking about.
Yeah.
So I went, and it affected me. I had never experienced reading the Bible myself. I don't know how much you know about Catholicism, but back in the 50s when I was raised, it was very strict.
Yep.
Very strict. The Mass was in Latin. You had a translation in your missal, but the priest faced away from the congregation. He was the conduit to God, and no one else.
Right.
So I thought, I don't know what this means, that you can actually pray and ask forgiveness without a priest. And so that was a very, very eye-opening experience for me.
So you mentioned it was profound. So I'm assuming, did you convert?
I did.
I thought so. And I'm assuming you still are pregnant. Okay, so that's why it was so profound. It has changed your life, and you've
changed my life,
and you've been following that ever since.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Right. Yeah, I think so too.
All right. What else do we got while you're out in Virginia there?
Well, I met some wonderful friends. I started going back to school because this is another profound thing, is where my husband and my marriage dissolved.
While you're in Virginia?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at that point, I had to either go back to school or go back to work because I frankly I've only worked once during my married life, and that was just to get out of the house, frankly.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point that I probably couldn't live on an LPN salary. Even with Phil's support, I probably couldn't do well for myself. So the rest of my story probably goes along with this idea that my spirituality changed. There was a course at the University of Virginia for nurses who were trying to get back into the workforce. So I took that course. It had a lot to do with math and new IV structures and pumps and equipment and all kinds of things that I was not exposed to in at least 10, 15 years.
Wow.
So that was very, very interesting. I loved it. So I went to work. I got a job part-time at the University of Virginia Hospital, and it was on a very, very difficult unit of orthopedic and spinal cord injury patients.
My ex-mother-in-law was in the same.
Really?
Yeah. St. Francis.
Ah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
So I've heard lots of horror stories. I'm sure you have some too. Yeah.
I got a million of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the nurse that was the head nurse on that unit, her name was Cindy. She became a very good friend. She taught me a lot about my practice and encouraged me. We became close friends. We still are friends to this day.
Awesome.
She and my friend Pat, who's my friend from high school, are my very best friends. So it kind of inspired me to go back to school because there was a community college there, and my boys were still in high school and middle school and grade school. Pat was still in grade school. So I went back to school and I studied for an associate degree in nursing. And at that time, then I worked as an LPN, but I was working on a registered nursing degree. And meanwhile, back in Wisconsin, my folks are getting elderly, and I'm an only daughter.
Right.
I only had one brother who was survived, but he was developmentally disabled, and I knew they needed help. And so when my marriage broke up, it was always my intention to help take care of them.
Yeah. So that's how you got back here.
That's how we got back here.
Well, first off, I commend you. I mean, going through divorce is never fun. Being out of the workforce for as long as you've been out of, and picking yourself up by the bootstraps and going back to school, that's awesome.
Thank you.
You know, and taking care of 5 kids. Yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, I commend you. I really do.
Thank you. I was kind of a stay-at-home mom, though, and actually those boys had to learn to do a lot of things for themselves because I was making cookies every other day and staying home and doing everything for them, and then they had to learn how to wash clothes.
Yeah,
and maybe
of course, right?
But actually, it made them much better husbands.
So now, you said you moved from Virginia back to here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did your ex stay out in Virginia?
Mm-hmm. He did.
So what was kind of the relationship with the kids and the dad?
Well, I think as good as it could have been. He saw them every weekend.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah, and he had I think, a fairly good relationship with them. Although probably not as intimate in terms of really deeply sharing and wanting.
I'm assuming did you move in with your parents, or did you move close by? Close by.
I rented a house the first year. Joe was the only one that stayed in Virginia to finish school.
Okay.
And the other boys went to college here, and the 2 youngest ones in Platteville.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they're really, really, I'm so proud of those young men. They're middle-aged now.
Yeah.
But they all have degrees. 3 of them have advanced degrees, and 1 is a PhD. So, I mean, they're great young men.
You did good.
Thank
you did good.
Well, that was divine intervention, believe me.
Right. Okay, so let's move a little bit in a different direction. So 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming we've got lots of grandkids to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's talk about the oldest. Does he got any kids?
The oldest is not married. He's the only
Not
one
married?
that's not married.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a bachelor.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Okay, well, that explains that, right? The next oldest?
Mark, he's a psychologist. He lives in New Jersey. He has 2 sons. One is graduated from college. One is graduating this year.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming they don't have kids yet, but could be possibly
No,
soon.
I'm not a great grandmother yet.
Okay.
No.
All right, I won't ask that question again then. So the third child.
Yes, he has 4 children,
Mhm.
3 boys and a daughter.
Wow, exact opposite of me.
Wow. I know.
Okay, and
And
where does
then-
he live?
He lives in Waukesha.
Oh, he does.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so we got
His 2 oldest boys, or 3 oldest boys, are finished with school
Okay.
and moved out
okay.
and on their own.
Okay.
Actually, my oldest grandson, who's Michael John's son, is in Thailand.
Really?
He loves it there. Yeah.
For military or,
No,
or
just to live.
really?
Yeah, he's
Wow,
been
that's
there.
cool.
About 3-4 years now. And
Really?
I think he's probably going to stay for a while
Yeah.
until he gets all his, let me be out of the country in
Yeah.
a beautiful
So
place.
is Oates. So is Oates.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Then Tim has 2 boys and a girl, Grace. And then Pat has a girl and a boy, one
Wow.
in high school and one in middle school.
what about life nowadays? What are we doing now?
Well, I'm enjoying retirement. Actually, I was very privileged to work for veterans, care for them. When I came here in 1983, there were very few nursing jobs available. There was a glut on the market, I guess you could call it. And I didn't even know what the VA was. And my friend Pat said, you should go try the VA because it's a big hospital.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went there, and I had experience in spinal cord injury, and so they have a big spinal cord injury unit
Yeah.
there. And long story short, they offered me a job, and I took it. I had 2 boys in college when we moved here, and they were living on campus. But then I had a teenage boy in high school and one in middle school, and I couldn't work any evenings. So at first they said, well, this is an evening position. Well, no, I can't work evenings. Then they offered me days, so I went.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how long were you there?
26 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time.
It is.
Always in the same in the
No.
No, okay. So
No.
what did y'all do there while you're during your
Well,
stay?
I started as a staff nurse on spinal cord injury,
Right.
and I became certified in rehabilitation because I love it. And then because I was more interested in a broader rehabilitation process and that clinical practice, I moved to rehabilitation, but as a head nurse.
Really?
Now, this is where the Lord comes in to my life profoundly. When I moved back here, my intentions were to help care for my parents. And I trusted that whatever job I had was going to help me to do that, because I couldn't figure out how I was going to do this with kids,
Yep.
college age and younger, and taking care of my parents, who were not debilitated yet, but very quickly they would have been.
Mm-hmm.
So I took this job as the head nurse, and in those days we still functioned as staff nurses as well. We didn't just wear a lab coat and sit in our office. We had to
Right.
go on the units and take care of patients. Then from there, I was able to get a more responsible job at a higher level within the facility, and I ended up, frankly, as the nurse executive there.
Okay.
And what that did for me was gave me a really good financial bearing. I had no need to depend on anyone for my finances,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very comfortable in my retirement, and that's all by grace. All by grace.
It's awesome.
I was asked to be the interim chief nurse in between assignments. The position was vacant, and I had no desire to apply for it. 3 people came to my office and urged me to apply. And when I did, I was very blessed to have everyone's support. So I was in that position about 7 years, and that it was wonderful. It was great. It was
Awesome.
great. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, A, to do what you really like,
Mm-hmm.
B, to be able to progress like you did and get all the support that you did.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Actually, the VA is a wonderful, wonderful place for nurses to work. I was given a scholarship for a bachelor's work on my bachelor's degree. And then I could have had a scholarship for a master's degree, which I completed at Marquette, but you had to give them back X number of years as service for the scholarship. I did that for my bachelor's, and I thought, well, let me just see if I can pay for this on my own.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow.
But I would have been there anyway, giving them back service. So the patients always made such an impression on me. I was a primary nurse to one young Air Force veteran who was in a very bad car accident on the way back from skiing. And he was a captain in the Air Force, a young guy, active duty, could not even breathe. He couldn't move any muscles except his facial muscles and turn his head. And he stuck with me all my career because I thought, he actually couldn't fly the plane. He was learning to be a pilot, but he got so airsick that he couldn't fly. But handsome, tall, totally changed his life. Totally changed his life. I flew with him to Tampa, the Tampa VA. We transferred him down there because his mother was going to take care of him. His wife left. It's a lot for a spouse to take on.
Yeah.
So that patient just stuck with me all my career. And you make these bonds with these veterans because they get all of their care there. And if they've got a chronic illness or an injury, they come back every year to get checked. And over the years, as I progressed into different positions, they'd come looking for me if I was their primary nurse. And when I was as the nurse executive, I would hear these electric wheelchairs coming down the hall. I remember you were my primary nurse, and look at where you are now. I know. They respect rank.
Oh, for sure.
A lot.
Well, and I mean, that speaks volumes to me as well. I mean, someone seeking you out years later, they remember you. I mean, that's...
Me too. It made a big imprint on my heart.
Sure.
Yeah.
So retired for 12 years. What's retired life like? Or you got projects? Are you taking care of somebody?
Yeah, no. Actually, I was. I think it was the right time to retire. I felt very comfortable leaving the job. I missed the people for a long time, but not the job. A lot of politics in the VA. A lot. Let's see. I volunteered. I volunteered at the courthouse. Right now, I'm in between volunteer positions. I do a lot of exercising. I belong to this chorus that I'm in a quartet, which is wonderful. A few years ago, I got interested in Ancestry.com because my relatives, my father is, he's an American-born of two immigrants. Around the turn of the century, they came from Italy. And that family, he had one sister who had 7 children. And they're the only relatives that those children had was my parents, my father, especially their uncle. They had a lot of tragedy in their lives. And I've often wanted to know more about that family. And my mother's family as well. Her parents had lived here for decades before she was born in 1907.
Okay.
So they were not the first generation of immigrant, and I'm working on that family now.
Yeah.
They had settled here in Wisconsin probably before the 1850s.
Wow.
So that's really early.
Yeah.
So I've been working on the Italian part of my family, and because there's so much oral history that I don't know. My 2 cousins lived to be 100,
Wow.
and I learned a lot from them, but not the whole story. And I found out that I, as the daughter of an Italian father whose parents were not naturalized when they had him, I qualified for dual citizenship
Oh, wow.
in Italy. And therefore my children will too. So I'm gathering all the information and hope to get that before I pass on. So, get all that paperwork set for them so they can go and get this citizenship if they want it.
Is there anything that you discovered that you wanna mention or talk about?
Well, I knew some things but not really exactly what the circumstances were. But my grandmother wanted her daughter to attend school in Italy, and so she took her back there when she was 9. I didn't know how old she was, but I found the manifests from the trips.
That's neat.
And but she got so homesick she wanted to come home at 16. She was there for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, she was in the same village going to school as they had immigrated from. And I know their names, but I can't find their birth dates. I can find my grandfather's birth date, but not my great-grandfather's. But anyway, I know when she came back, she was married very quickly, and I think it was an arranged marriage.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
because I think she was only 17.
Oh, boy.
And that's how she had that big family with 2 different husbands.
Mm-hmm.
Just fascinating. And my one of my grandsons worked on my husband's ancestry, and they are pure Irish.
Really?
Yeah, great name like Murphy goes well with
Yeah.
with
guess
their
so. I guess
ancestry.
so, yeah.
Yeah, some of his relatives immigrated through Canada, and there's some Indian blood along the way. And my husband's father looked very much, he had a lot of Indian characteristics.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So that's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I think it will be for them as well.
Yeah, that's neat.
Mm-hmm.
That's neat. My wife's family has been doing that in the last year and a half as well.
Mm-hmm.
My father-in-law passed away last year, and they're same kind of deal. They're finding all these really unique
Mm-hmm.
stories, and you're like, wow,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, anything else you want to talk about? Because I don't want to feel like I rushed you, but I feel like we've really progressed rather quickly.
Yeah. I think my work history at the VA is very interesting. I've talked with my children about it a lot, I think, but maybe not particular things.
I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I'm sure your family's going to appreciate it as well.
I think so too.
And I guess we'll wrap her up.